This was completely crazy. I was stuck in the demon world with the man I loved, and I had to wait until the war was over to even consider going home. I held James's hand tightly as we walked through the halls of the castle, now worried and remembering my nightmare once again. I began to feel nervous, nauseous even. There were so many things wrong about this, and there were even more things that could go wrong with this plan. Kill the Demon Lord? It sounded so simple, but this war had been going on for a while. I don't know what sounds simple about killing a Demon Lord. Who knew truly if this was the final battle? James most likely felt the nervousness in my hand as he gave it a gentle squeeze, catching my attention and breaking my thoughts.
Are you okay?
No, for being honest with him. I couldn't lie to him. I was worried about this whole ordeal. Add on the fact that we were in the demon world where James came from, and my worries increased tenfold. James gently squeezed my hand, leaning over to kiss my head gently.
Everything will be all right. We'll get back home soon enough.
Oh, that sounded a little strange. I know, but... James looked to me, staring at me with worry of his own.
Are you worried about your nightmare?
Sounds like cutting out for some reason. Is everything okay? Voice acting? Weird. I nodded. The nightmare I had mildly plagued me, reminding me of what things James could potentially do. I knew it wasn't the truth, but a part of me became fearful of it honestly being the case. James furrowed his eyebrows slightly before releasing my hand and wrapping it beneath his arm, walking with me like a gentleman, all like when we first met.
Whatever happens, I promise that no one will hurt you.
Why is it doing this? Okay, I quit the game and came back into it, so hopefully it's fixed now. Let's see. I squeezed James's arm, believing him at least for now. It was comforting to know that he was going to protect me and help me through this. We continued down the hall, led by our guide toward our room. The others were given rooms apparently on the opposite end of the castle, while James and I claimed the ambassador's room I had stayed in the night before. At least it was a room I was familiar with. I began to space out, imagining what was going to happen. We would kill the Demon Lord, break the curse on me, and go home to be married. That was the plan, but what if we couldn't kill him? What if he was more powerful than we thought? James, however, gently nudged me, catching my attention and breaking me from my thoughts.
Did you know that time works differently between the human and demon worlds?
I did, actually. I could tell that he was trying to calm me down with something else to keep my mind on. I became curious as to what he meant. Also, I'm glad your voice is not glitching out anymore. Time works differently here?
Indeed. In this world, time moves slower. What would take a day to grow in the human world would take 5 days here.
I was astonished. Time was that different? I began to wonder how long had I been gone from the human world if that was the case. As if James read my mind, he smiled at me.
You were gone for about 5 hours before we found you.
Whoops. 5 hours?! I had been in the demon world for an entire day, but back home I hadn't been gone that long. It made no sense at all, but James continued to speak as I stared in shock. Shock?
When you didn't arrive at the hall, we sent everyone home and used our powers to make sure no one would be suspicious. Once everyone left, we tracked you down and came here to find you.
Those powers come in handy so much of the time. I nodded in reply, taking in the explanation. It was crazy to think about, but I guess it made sense. My mind wanted to fight it, but I had to remember. This was a new world filled with its own rules, so human logic didn't necessarily apply here. We finally arrived in our room and were left alone for the night. I sat down on the bed, feeling the exhaustion of the day take over as James examined the room carefully. He walked around the room, observing each bit of decor with curious care.
So this is Lilith Castle.
Come on, click. I raised an eyebrow. This place had a name? Lilith Castle? James nodded, walking over to the tapestry on the wall and examining it as he explained.
This castle was the home of the first succubus, Lilith. Demons of Lilith like myself and my brothers come from one of thousands of branches of her bloodline. but we're not pure-blooded incubi. Diana, however, is a pure-blooded succubus, directly descended from Lilith herself.
Interesting. My dream flashed before my eyes, reminding me of Diana's words towards James. I nodded in understanding as he continued with a small smile.
That's why her family was able to convince the Demon Lord to make her my betrothed. They were extremely powerful and could easily charm others, being of pure Lilith blood.
I could only imagine it. Remembering how Diana controlled an entire school like it was easy for her sent a small shiver down my spine. If she was that powerful, then how powerful was she now after so long? James chuckled a bit, breaking my thoughts.
Of course, you know what happened after that.
Okay, what? I'm gonna have to use my enter key. My mouse hates this game for whatever reason. James finally walked over and sat beside me, softly wrapping an arm around my waist and bringing me close to him. I nuzzled his shoulder, enjoying the warmth of his body. I remembered clearly what happened. James chose me after all, and I chose him. We loved each other and defied Diana's attempts to take him away because of it. I couldn't have been more proud of myself at that moment in time. James leaned down a bit and whispered in my ear, making me shiver slightly in his arms.
Besides, the woman I'm engaged to now is more amazing than any princess in all of the 5 worlds.
Wow. I blushed at his words, feeling my heart skip a beat. James really did love me. Oh. Kiss him. He was so sweet and caring. I felt blessed being able to be with him, both as his fiancé and physically in the same world. My worries began to slowly break apart and melt in my chest as I looked up at him and leaned in, capturing his lips with my own. James seemed surprised for a moment before he let a soft groan escape his lips and kissed me back. He gently pressed a hand on the back of my head, keeping me close as we kissed each other lovingly. It was almost orgasmic the way his lips moved against mine. Whoa, down, girl. As we slowly pulled away from each other, letting our breaths intermingle in the space between us, James smiled. I became lost in his whiskey brown eyes, wanting so much to forever be entranced by them.
Come, let's get some sleep. We have a lot to do tomorrow.
I nodded, and both of us settled into the bed, drifting to sleep as our heads hit the pillows. I felt at peace, knowing that James was by my side. But my peace didn't last. Dun dun dun. Great. Oh crap, not this stuff again. What the? I felt the void around me shift and brighten to a blinding white, causing me to shut my eyes. Feathers gently brushed against my skin, and I lurched and squirmed away from them instinctively. What was happening to me? Remove memory? Diana's voice echoed through the air, surprising me and caused me to look around. As I turned my head to look behind me, a pair of arms wrapped themselves around me and held me close. What?
Don't struggle.
Saero. Saero?
Et hic habet potestatum, adoro teut non exidurum.
E credere de loco isto.
Silentia media vetor.
Silence somebody? I became lost in what was happening. Nothing was making sense, but I knew that they were speaking in some form of Latin. The voices that weren't Diana and Saero, however, struck fear into my core with each word they spoke.
Saero, end this!
On Diana's command, Saero cast some sort of spell, causing his body and mind to become enveloped in gold light. I felt every nerve in my body heat up almost uncomfortably, making me squirm slightly in Saero's arms. Saero, however, tightened his hold on me and continued casting his spell. At last, the world around me suddenly went dark, and I found myself shooting up in bed, awake. Gah!
Love?
I looked to my side to see James, shaken awake by my sudden outburst. His eyes were glossed over from exhaustion, but he continued to watch me with worry. This was the second time I woke him up like this. Damn it. At least we didn't scream, "Get away from me!" So was that real, or was that another vision, or what?
Why are angels hunting you?
Ah. Well, it's in the name, you see. I don't know why, though. James and I suddenly shot our heads towards the sound of Diana's voice, seeing her and Saero by the door. She had her arms crossed and a look of pure irritation on her face as she awaited my answer. However, I didn't know what to say. Angels were hunting me? I stared at Diana, confused as to what she meant. James sat up at last, matching her expression with irritation of his own.
What are you talking about?
I wasn't speaking to you, James.
James? My eyes widened at the slip. Did she almost say James's real name? Diana growled and clicked her teeth before looking to me again, glaring harder.
Your dream almost allowed them to erase your memories.
Oh, interesting. Why are they trying to erase my memories, though? I thought I was allowed to know. My body chilled at the thought. What the hell? I was confused and fearful of what was going on. What was happening? Why were angels after me? James wrapped his arms around me, seeing me visibly shaken at Diana's words.
Explain, Diana.
Ask your fiancée why she's targeted by them. Don't ask me. I want to know as well.
I don't know. Did I make someone angry? Don't say anything. I don't know. I truly didn't know. What could I say? This was the first time I had heard of angels hunting me. The dream was not a dream I had ever experienced before.
Angels don't target just anyone. They have to have a reason for hunting people down to erase their memories.
Especially when their target is in the demon world.
That's a good point, too. I held my head and shook it, trying to figure it out. Did I do something wrong? What did I do to incur the wrath of angels? Diana sighed and rubbed her temple.
Well, they've been expelled from the castle for now. For how long? Who knows? However, we need to figure out why they are trying to take your memories away.
Is it so that I can leave the demon world? Like, if I have no memories, that like makes up my soul? So that's another way of dying here, so I can be returned to the human world or something? Theory. That's my theory. Looking up at last at Diana, I could tell that this was a serious situation. Saero looked at the floor, exhausted from casting the spell to expel them himself. Diana growled beneath her teeth as she looked to the wall.
Another problem. Great. Can this war be any more irritating?
Probably. We better not tempt fate. I felt myself curl up into myself a bit at Diana's irritation. I was already a problem that she was going to help solve, and now there was a second problem on top of that. James hugged me gently against his chest comfortingly, feeling me shirk back away from Diana.
Is that all?
From the tone of James's voice, he wanted Diana to leave immediately. Diana looked over and stared at James, a flash of slight fear in her eyes before her face hardened to a cold glare.
No. Whatever you are doing to try and make me fear you needs to stop.
Interesting.
I don't know what you are talking about.
Say what you will, but I can recognize fear enthrallment anywhere. Thank your father for that.
There's such a thing as fear enthrallment? Interesting. I looked at James, seeing him glare hard at Diana, while Diana simply glared back. When my eyes trailed to Saero, I could see a form of jealousy burn in his gaze at my fiancé. What was happening? We got a weird love square going on, girl. Honestly. James?
Yes, love?
Diana turned on her heel towards Saero, now furious for some reason. Saero, seeing his mistress turn, quickly turned as well and opened the door for her.
Sleep. We have work to do tomorrow.
Diana left with Saero right behind her, closing the door. James's embrace finally relaxed around me and pulled me close. What was that about?
I don't know.
Truly? Talk to me, James. James nodded as I turned in his arms to fully observe him. James's face seemed very genuine. Still, something was off, and I knew it. It had happened when James arrived, and apparently only occurred when Diana was around. Oh great, we're just gonna be jealous about this whole thing again, aren't we? Barf! It was some sort of power struggle between Diana and James, and he was winning, at least from what I could tell. I shook my head. If James didn't know what was happening, then maybe it was just my imagination. James, however, stared at me with pure concern written all over his expression.
But was Diana right? angels after you?
Oh no, don't do this again, James. Come back to me. I don't know. I just had a dream that was full of light and feathers, and... A look of fear ran across James's face for a moment before he shook his head and returned to his calculated but worried expression. Was Diana correct? Was it an angel attack and not just some random dream? Come on. My memories recalled when I was captured. The voices that appeared in my room before the imps came sounded so similar to the ones in my dream. Had they been angels as well? This was crazy. What was going on? First I'm cursed, then I'm hunted? This was unbelievable in every sense of the word. Nothing made sense, and this entire situation was confusing. What would angels want with me? James shook his head and kissed my forehead.
Well, they're gone now. Let's get some more sleep.
Okay, you're fixed again. I nodded, wrapping my arms around James and lying back with him. He slowly began to pet my hair, most likely waiting for me to sleep first before he did. Slowly, I closed my eyes and let the darkness of sleep take over me once again. This time there were no rocky dreams. I simply floated in the darkness until I naturally woke up, still in James's arms. I looked up at James's sleeping face, so peaceful and almost happy. His arms around my form made me feel warm and fuzzy inside, causing me to cuddle closer to his body. Unconsciously, James pulled me closer to him, wrapping his arms tighter around me. I could tell he was awake, however. His breathing wasn't slow like it usually was when he slept. James? No response. He was pretending, which made me giggle a bit. Little things like this took my mind off of the world and made me forget my troubles, whatever they were. I guess that was the blessing of being in love. I smiled and kissed James's cheek, making his smile grow a bit more. I knew it. Look at that smile. I know you're awake.
No, you don't.
I playfully smacked his upper arm, making him laugh as well and open his eyes to look at me with a loving but tired gaze. I became once again lost in his eyes as he smiled at me.
Good morning. Did you sleep better?
I nodded, knowing he would be happy to hear it. I was more than happy to say it before snuggling into his arms, nuzzling his chest. What about you? Did you sleep well? James nodded and ran his hand through my hair, petting me lovingly.
I did. All I did was dream of you.
Wow. A soft blush formed on my cheeks before I looked up at him, seeing him smile down at me.
It's the truth. Would you like to hear?
I felt myself nod before I even tried to think about the question. James smirked a bit before wrapping his arms fully around me and leaning in to whisper in my ear.
I dreamt that we were on a private island, basking in the sand beneath the sun. The wind was perfect, and you looked absolutely stunning in your swimsuit.
Mm-hmm. I began to imagine it myself, causing the blush on my face to intensify. As James tightened his hug around me, my body began to heat up on its own from the warmth his body gave me.
Then you pulled me into a kiss, one that I couldn't help but melt into. You kept teasing me until I pinned you down against the sand, and I made you beg for me to kiss you.
James peppered kisses along my neck, making my body shiver at both the image of his dream and the feeling of his lips upon my skin. I let out a silent but shaky sigh as James nuzzled my head, opening his mouth to say more. Alas, our moment was broken by a loud knock on our door.
Oi! Quit fucking in there! We got food for— Yo! Little shit! Oh, I don't want to imagine that, dude!
Poor Matthew, scarred for life.
We do have food, though. May we come in?
Irene? James and I let out a simultaneous sigh. So much for enjoying the moment. This was the misfortune of not being alone. I knew that we would eventually have our alone time together, but for now a blush of embarrassment ran across my cheeks in response to Sam's allegation. James smiled and kissed my forehead before lifting his head and sitting up.
Come on in, we just got up.
Oh, Irene must be the fabulous lady of my boo Eric. Don't you two look lovely? I sat up as well right as the door opened to the hallway, revealing James's brothers and their wives with plates of food. Eric and Irene each carried 2 plates and handed the extras to me and James. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Eric.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Irene.
My pleasure.
On the plate was food I recognized. Bread, cheese, fruit, and some kind of jerky. I assumed it was safe and something I could stomach. James placed his plate on his lap before looking to the group.
So, training starts today.
Finally! I get to kick some ass.
So excited.
You kick ass anyway, you dork.
You two are too precious together. I don't want to break up the Carrie-Sam ship. You guys are perfect. Although I am curious now as to who James's wife will be when we do one of these other guys' roots. Sam blushed and rubbed his neck before stuffing his face with food, not wanting to say any more. Matthew laughed and nodded.
We know what you mean, dude. We can finally kick that old man's ass.
Not to be the skeptical brother here, but is it possible to become stronger than him in just a week? It's been a while since we've had any encounter involving combat after all.
We'll kill him.
Oh. I did not expect that from Damien of all people, and with that expression. Oh my goodness. Everyone looked to Damien, seeing his stern and cold expression. I frowned, knowing why Damien was so angered at the Demon Lord. As the bastard son, Damien had been left for dead and only survived thanks to his brothers. Damien had more reason than most to hold a grudge against the Demon Lord. James, however, cleared his throat and looked to Eric.
We won't be fighting him alone. This rebellion will help us and allow us to focus our energy on defeating him.
I've been waiting years to kick his arrogant brute face in.
I think we all have a grudge against him, Sam.
Yeah.
We got this.
I would not be so sure.
Excuse me, don't interrupt people. It's rude. Everyone turned to see Saero in the doorway alone, leaning against the archway with his arms crossed.
Oh, Saero. Where is...
My mistress had a rough night. She's still recovering from it.
Oh, you don't say. I grimaced, knowing that the reason she had a rough night was because of me. Saero, however, seemed to be re-energized and somewhat bright-eyed. His gaze landed on James and glared hard, causing my fiancé to straighten up a bit.
None of you know what has happened these past 10 years. None of you know of the Demon Lord's true strength.
Then would you care to enlighten us?
At last, Saero pushed off of the doorway and walked further into the room, closing the door behind him. He looked at each brother, examining each man before settling his gaze on James again.
The Demon Lord is a madman.
You don't need to tell us that.
No. He was mad before, but he lost his mind completely when my mistress formed the rebellion against him. He's killed thousands by his own hand alone out of pure rage.
Saero's grip on his spear tightened as something resurfaced in his thoughts, reflected in his glare.
Too many times has my lady faced off against him and almost lost her life in exchange.
Saero's cold stare rehardened itself on his face as he shook away the thought and looked to Damien, who had a stony expression to match.
What makes you think that you, a band of humanized demons, have any chance of destroying him on your own?
The brothers seemed to glare in unison at Saero, as did the wives. I, however, saw his point. The boys had been in the human world for over 2 years. They had missed so much here and had grown accustomed to human life. I had only been here a day and knew that this world was much more ruthless than the human world. Sam stood and marched towards Saero, standing almost nose to nose with the guard and giving him a terrifying glare.
What makes you think we can't, prick?
Yeah, prick.
I have seen with my own eyes what the Demon Lord can do in battle.
So have they.
We had to live with that sack of shit for almost 100 years as his sons. We know more than you ever will.
Sam, that's enough.
No, it's not.
Sam and Saero continued to glare daggers into each other's souls, anger burning in their eyes without any sign of retreat.
We had to live with the fact that our dad burnt down villages, enslaved people, and stole hundreds of lives day after day, ending his night fucking a woman who was chained to a goddamn bed. What the fuck makes you think that we don't know anything about him?
Damien seemed to flinch at Sam's words, but his angered face remained as Saero and Sam had their stare down. Saero, however, remained unfazed.
Like I said, he has completely lost his mind. If he was a monster before, he is Satan himself now. He does more than slaughter and burn villages. He takes prisoners and paints the ground with their blood while howling into the sky. He leads legions of imp demons who do nothing but make sure their victims suffer in agony before making them beg for death. He now takes pleasure not in a bed, but in the screams of millions.
In an act of defiance, Saero straightened his back and almost towered over Sam, gritting his teeth.
If anything, the reason he's as mad as he is now is because you all decided to run, so the blame for this war rests on all your shoulders.
Well, get out, Saero. That's ridiculous. He's mad. He was gonna have to be killed sooner or later. This is just like a tipping point. He reached his tipping point. Ooh. Nice one, Sam! I love Saero, but I think Saero deserved a punch in the jaw for that. Instantly, Sam's fist met Saero's jaw and forced him back towards the door. Saero slammed into the door and gripped his hand over his mouth, rubbing it in pain.
Sam!
Sam!
Fuck you! Do not blame this fucking war on us!
I'm with Sam on this one, though. Saero's just projecting jealousy, because he's jealous of all these guys and the relationship they had with his lady love. Mostly. Saero wiped his lips of fresh blood that began dripping from his mouth and glared, as if the punch wasn't as painful as it looked.
Arrogant mutt! The call of the human world was too tempting for you to ignore. You have forgotten about duty and responsibility.
We left because we were tired of the lives we had.
You left the world and everyone in it to become the victim of a madman and a world war. None of you understand what we have even sacrificed to stay alive.
No, we don't. And we never will.
James finally stood from the bed and placed a hand on Sam's shoulder, forcing him to step back. As Sam rejoined Carrie, who wrapped her arms around him in comfort, James looked to Saero.
But you cannot blame us for wanting to be free.
And that's the point. Saero, on the other hand, began to laugh. It was a painful laugh, but one full of anger.
You have no right to defend yourself, eldest son. Because of you specifically, my mistress's entire world was destroyed.
I stared wide-eyed at Saero. This was about their betrothal, but James did what was best for him. He and I didn't care about the consequences of our love, but Saero's painful words made me shake. Saero's eyes began to burn once again in jealousy at James and rage at his words.
Because of you, the only people she had in this world, her family, was brutally murdered in the most sadistic of ways. The imps painted the walls of the castle nursery in the king and queen's blood, while her unborn baby sister was ripped from the queen's womb and nailed to the wall like a hunting trophy.
Oh no, her sister. Crap. Well, that's terrible. I felt sick to my stomach just imagining it, despite not wanting to in the first place. The imagery was too much, but Saero continued without mercy. I think you might be sharing a bit too much for Diana's liking, though, dude. You might want to step back a bit.
Saero had to watch her kingdom burn before her eyes and listen to the screams of her people when she returned from the human world after hunting you all down. It was only after the siege when she saw the fate of her own family.
Saero finally straightened up. At the sight, he looked powerful and strong, but his eyes burned with anger and rage as he glared at James. For the first time in my life, I saw fear run through James's eyes.
Yet you all claim innocence. You all know nothing of innocence! Enough settle!
I was waiting for her to show up. Oh dear. I'm scared to go any further. This is just gonna explode even more. Alright, here we go. Everyone shot their heads towards Diana's voice to see her standing in the corner of the room, shrouded by shadow. However, I could faintly see tears running down Diana's cheeks despite the terrifying anger on her face towards Saero.
You will not speak of the past again, Saero. Understood?
Yes, my lady.
Diana finally stepped away from the corner and stood in front of Saero and across from James, uncaring towards the rogue tears running down her face.
What's done is done. We can't ever change the past, no matter how desperately we try. What matters now is preparing for the Demon Lord in the final battle.
James nodded. It was a sour note to end on, but Diana's words were the truth. We couldn't linger on pointing fingers and having doubts now. Diana ran a hand through her hair and looked around the room, pressing her lips into a fine line.
So, about all of you participating in the war, you all obviously need to train.
Everyone nodded in agreement to Diana's statement. While we weren't battle-ready, we still needed to at least know how to defend ourselves. Diana, however, looked to me.
You, most of all.
Huh? Me? I was suddenly confused. How come I was the odd one out that had to be ready the most? The last thing I remembered about me training was that Diana was against the idea altogether. Diana sighed and rubbed her temple.
Apparently, there are guidelines to breaking this curse. Not only do we have to kill the Demon Lord, but you have to be nearby when it happens for the curse to even break.
Oh, great. That makes no sense. Where did you learn this?
Shadow. He spent the night trying to find alternative ways to break your curse. Unfortunately, we didn't find anything of the sort, but we found the guidelines to breaking it.
Well, it still makes no sense.
Even while it doesn't, it's still better to be safe than sorry. I don't want to kill him and then still have you stuck here because of an error.
I could only sigh and take it in. So I had to be there when the Demon Lord fell. Great. Diana waved her hand dismissively through the air, breaking my potential thoughts.
Anyway, we can't have you dying on the way there, and we can't monitor you when we're in battle. You should at least know how to defend yourself. That's why we've come up with a solution.
Huh? What solution?
Simple. The other rebel leaders and Saero have agreed that if you'd like a trainer to enhance your abilities, you can train with one of them.
Is this what he came to tell us and it just, like, veered way off into the ditch? Oh. I stared, seeing Saero step forward with a nod.
Each of the leaders is proficient in a different area of magic and battle strategy, good enough for self-defense. I can't speak for the others, but I can assure you that with Saero's skill and training methods, you will be well prepared by the time the siege arrives.
Saero nodded and bowed to me slightly. While I was flattered at the idea, did I really need a trainer? I knew Taekwondo, and I at least knew how to defend myself, demon or not. Then again, we were in the demon world where magic was the norm. What would the others teach me, I guess is a good starting point. Diana ran a hand through her hair, looking to the side as she listed off each leader and their skills.
Sergeant is a brute demon, bred from a nomadic tribe. He most likely teach you the ways of the brute demon, using your fists and speed to keep you alive.
Okay.
Shadow is, by definition, a shadow demon, so he'd probably teach you about dark magic, light manipulation, and assassination.
Intriguing.
Rabbit is a wild magic-based animal demon, using her animal-focused energy as her weapon. She'd probably teach you how to do the same.
I have animal-focused energy?
Fae? I am honestly not sure. I know they can change their size and use elemental magic as well, but to be honest, I do not know what they would teach you.
Oh my. And what about you, Diana? Diana stared at me as if I had 3 heads. No one else seemed opposed to the idea, but I was genuinely curious. Diana pressed her lips together and looked away from me.
My hands are too full.
That's a lie.
Called out.
Saero?
My lady is proficient with blades and enthrallments. I've seen her cause armies to fall to their knees and bark on her command.
Diana glared hard at Saero, but I was pretty convinced that what Saero said was true. Diana was pretty powerful. He looked so pleased with himself. Still, Diana is my trainer? What would come of it? I say we go with Diana. I'm gonna click it and then... I'm gonna explain my reasoning. She was the one that was protecting us in our dream with James. She seems to be important to this whole storyline, and I don't know, maybe it would make Saero feel better. And also give Diana some confidence towards the coming battle. I don't know. That's my reasoning. We're gonna try that for the first time and see how that goes.
I will make sure that everything is settled for you, my lady. Please consider training her as you know her best.
Fine.
With that, Diana turned on her heel and left the room.
Finish eating. Afterwards, you should start training.
Everyone in the room nodded their affirmation as Diana and Saero left.
Well, it looks like we'll be busy for the next couple of days.
This'll be fun.
Man, training's gonna suck.
Poor Matthew.
It'll be worth it, though.
Damien's right.
As we all finished eating, everyone left to either train or do things on their own. I left to start my own work, determined to be prepared for what was to come. The Demon Lord wasn't going to win. I wouldn't let him.